Evan Cole's hands trembled as he stared at the contract that could save his daughter's future, or destroy what was left of his soul. 1 year, one lie, one ice-cold executive who needed a husband by midnight on her 30th birthday or lose everything. Sloane Hart didn't do feelings. She did strategy. And Evan? He was drowning in medical debt, working double shifts, watching his 6-year-old daughter eat cereal for dinner because that's all they could afford. The pen hovered over the signature line. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glittered with possibilities neither of them could touch. Until now. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're already hooked, hit that like button. This is just the beginning. The fluorescent lights in the 20th floor hallway buzzed with the kind of persistence that made Evan's headache pulse in rhythm. It was 11:47 on a Thursday night, and he was still here, still breathing recycled air, still pretending the knot in his chest was just exhaustion and not the slow-motion collapse of everything he'd promised to protect. His daughter's face floated in his mind. Mia, 6 years old, gap-toothed smile, asking him that morning why they couldn't buy the good cereal anymore, the kind with the cartoon character on the box. He told her they were being smart with money. She'd nodded like she understood, those wide brown eyes accepting his words without question, trusting him completely. That trust was a weight that made his spine ache. Evan pushed through the door to the break room, the stale coffee smell hitting him like a familiar insult. The pot was half full and probably 6 hours old, but he poured a cup anyway because the alternative was falling asleep at his desk, and he still had 2 reports to finish before he could even think about the 40-minute subway ride home to Queens. The medical bills sat in a folder on his kitchen counter. He'd stopped opening them weeks ago. 15,000, 22,000, 38,000. The numbers had stopped meaning anything except impossible. Sarah's cancer had eaten through their savings, their insurance maximums, their hope, and finally Sarah herself. The hospital had been very sorry for his loss. They'd also been very clear about payment expectations. Evan rubbed his eyes and checked his phone. Mia's babysitter had texted 3 hours ago, asleep by 8:30. Finished her homework. She's such a sweet girl. Sweet, kind, trusting. All the things this world would eventually punish her for unless he could give her something better. Education, opportunities, a foundation that didn't crumble the moment life got hard. He dumped the coffee down the sink without drinking it and headed back toward his cubicle, the maze of identical workspaces stretching out under the emergency lighting that stayed on all night. Hartwell and Associates never really slept. Marketing campaigns didn't stop for human needs like rest or family or sanity. That's when he saw her. Sloane Hart moved through the hallway like she owned not just the building, but the molecular structure of the air itself. Evan had seen her exactly 3 times in his 2 years at the company, always from a distance, always surrounded by assistants and executives who moved in her orbit like moons around a planet. She was the founder's daughter, the executive prodigy who'd taken a division that was hemorrhaging money and turned it into the company's highest earner in 18 months. She was also, according to office gossip, completely devoid of human warmth. Evan stepped aside automatically, making himself smaller, invisible. That's what you did when people like Sloane Hart walked past. You got out of the way. Except she wasn't looking where she was going. Her phone was pressed to her ear, her voice low and sharp, and she rounded the corner at exactly the wrong moment. The collision wasn't dramatic, just a bump, shoulder to shoulder. But it was enough. Paper scattered. Her phone clattered to the floor, and a sealed envelope, cream-colored and expensive-looking, slid across the tile to stop at Evan's feet. "Damn it!" Sloane's voice was ice and precision. She crouched to gather the papers, movements efficient, controlled. "Watch where you're—" "I'm sorry." Evan bent down quickly, reaching for the envelope. "I didn't see you coming." Their hands touched the envelope at the same time. Sloane looked up, and Evan felt the full weight of her attention for the first time. Her eyes were gray, not soft gray, not gentle gray, but the gray of winter storms and unforgiving decisions. She studied him for exactly 2 seconds, long enough to catalog and dismiss him. "Move." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Evan pulled his hand back and stood, holding the envelope out to her. She took it without acknowledgement, already turning away, phone back to her ear. No, she was saying to whoever was on the other end. I don't care what Marcus thinks the optics are. The merger happens on my timeline, or it doesn't happen at all. She walked away, heels clicking against tile, and Evan released a breath he hadn't known he was holding. That should have been the end of it. Ships passing, a forgettable moment in a forgettable night. But when he got back to his cubicle, there was another envelope on his keyboard, identical cream paper, his name written in elegant script across the front. Evan looked around. The floor was empty except for two other marketing assistants crashed out at their desks, dead to the world. No one was watching. No one cared. He opened the envelope. Inside was $500 in crisp bills and a note on heavy cardstock. For your discretion. S8. Evan stared at the money. $500. That was groceries for 2 months. That was the electric bill and the internet. That was breathing room he hadn't had in so long he'd forgotten what it felt like. His hands shook as he put the money back in the envelope. Then he walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the executive floor. The 30th floor didn't look like the rest of the building. The carpets were thick enough to swallow sound. The walls were real wood, not laminate. Everything smelled like leather and old money, and the kind of success that didn't have to announce itself. Evan felt like an intruder. He was an intruder. But he walked to the corner office anyway, the one with Sloane Hart's name on a brushed steel plate, and knocked. Come in, her voice carried through the door, impatient. Evan pushed it open. Sloane sat behind a desk that probably cost more than his car, her jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, attention focused on dual monitors displaying charts and projections that meant nothing to him. She didn't look up. I didn't order anything, she said. Wrong office. I'm not making a delivery. Evan stepped inside, closing the door behind him. I'm returning something. That got her attention. She looked up, recognition flickering across her features, followed immediately by irritation. You're the hallway collision. She leaned back in her chair. I already compensated you for the inconvenience. Evan placed the envelope on her desk. I don't want your money. Sloane stared at the envelope like it was a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit. Everyone wants money, not for bumping into someone in a hallway. Evan kept his voice steady. We both weren't paying attention. That doesn't require compensation. I see. Sloane's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them. A recalibration, an assessment. What's your name? Evan Cole. I work in marketing, product development division. And you thought it was appropriate to come to my office at midnight to return money I gave you willingly? I thought it was appropriate to correct a misunderstanding. Evan met her eyes. I'm not looking for a payout. I'm just trying to do my job and get home to my daughter. The mention of his daughter was calculated, a humanizing detail, a gentle boundary. He watched Sloane process it, saw the slight narrowing of her eyes. How old? 6. And where is she now? With a babysitter. Asleep, hopefully. Sloane picked up the envelope, turning it over in her hands. You're in debt. It wasn't a question. Evan felt his jaw tighten. That's not relevant to this conversation. Everything is relevant if it explains behavior. Sloane opened a drawer and dropped the envelope inside without looking at it. People in debt don't refuse money. They especially don't make grand gestures about integrity when $500 could solve immediate problems. Maybe I have different problems. Such as not wanting to owe anyone anything. Evan took a step back toward the door. I should go. I'm sorry I bothered you. Wait. The word stopped him. He turned. Sloane stood, moving around her desk with that same controlled precision. Up close, she was smaller than he'd expected, maybe 5'6" in heels, but she radiated an intensity that made size irrelevant. You're clean, she said, almost to herself. Excuse me? No disciplinary record, no missed days, no drama. She tilted her head slightly. Widowed, single father, medical debt from your late wife's illness, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, correct? Evan's blood went cold. How do you know that? I know everything about my employees. The question is why you're different from the others. Sloane circled him slowly, and Evan had the distinct feeling of being evaluated for purchase. Why refuse easy money when you're drowning? I'm not drowning. You're working 70-hour weeks, your credit score dropped 40 points in the last 6 months, and you're 3 months behind on student loan payments. Sloan stopped in front of him. That's not swimming. That's treading water in a riptide. Evan forced himself to breathe. If you're trying to scare me, I'm trying to understand you. Sloan's voice dropped, losing some of its sharp edge. Because I need someone I can trust, and trust is a rare commodity in my world. Trust for what? Sloan walked back to her desk and pulled out a file, thick, official-looking, the kind that represented lawyers and binding agreements. She set it between them. Sit down, Mr. Cole. We need to have a conversation about your future. Come. Evan sat because his legs made the decision before his brain caught up. The leather chair was too comfortable, the kind that probably cost more than a month of his rent. Sloan returned to her side of the desk, the file closed between them like a barrier. What I'm about to tell you is confidential, she began. If you repeat it to anyone, I will destroy you professionally in ways you can't imagine. Do you understand? Evan's mouth was dry. Yes. My father died 6 months ago. You may have seen the announcement. I heard something about it. Everyone had heard about it. Richard Hart, business legend, philanthropist, ruthless negotiator. His death had made the front page. His will contained a clause. Sloan's voice was clinical, discussing facts rather than feelings. Control of the company, specifically his controlling shares and board position, transfers to me on my 30th birthday, but only if I'm married. Evan blinked. What? My father believed unmarried people lack stability. He believed marriage demonstrates commitment, foresight, and the ability to maintain complex, long-term relationships. The bitterness in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. He also believed I was too focused on work to build a personal life, and that this would eventually make me a poor leader. Evan searched for words. That's insane. That's my father. Sloan opened the file, revealing pages of dense legal text. If I'm not married by midnight on my 30th birthday, which is in 4 weeks, his shares transfer to my brother Grant. Grant, who has spent the last decade coasting on the family name while I've actually built this company into something that matters. Evan's head spun. Why are you telling me this? Sloan looked up, and for the first time, Evan saw something human flicker across her face, something tired, something desperate. Because I'm offering you a job, Mr. Cole, a very specific, very lucrative job. She pushed the file across the desk. I need you to pretend to be my husband for 1 year. The words hung in the air like smoke. Evan stared at her, waiting for the punchline, the reveal that this was some elaborate test or corporate psychology experiment. You're serious? Completely. You want me, a marketing assistant you literally met in a hallway an hour ago, to marry you, fake marry you? Yes. Evan stood up so fast the chair rolled backward. This is crazy. You can't be serious. Sit down. No, I'm going home. I'm going to forget this conversation happened, and your daughter needs heart surgery. Evan froze. Sloan's expression didn't change. Mia Cole, age 6, diagnosed with atrial septal defect at age 4, currently manageable with medication, but her cardiologist has recommended surgical intervention within the next 2 years. Estimated cost, even with insurance, $90,000 minimum. The room tilted. Evan gripped the back of the chair. How do you know about Mia's heart? I told you, I know everything about my employees. Sloan's voice softened, barely, almost imperceptibly. I also know you've been researching surgeons, hospitals, payment plans. I know you lie awake at night wondering which bill to pay first. I know you're running out of time. Evan couldn't breathe. His daughter's medical file was private, protected, sealed. But of course, someone like Sloan Hart had ways around those protections. You had no right. I had every right. You work for me. Sloan stood, moving around the desk again, but this time there was something different in her posture, less predator, more human. I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you this so you understand what I'm offering. Which is? Complete debt erasure. Your medical bills, your student loans, your credit card debt, all of it, gone. A salary increase to $150,000 a year for the duration of our arrangement. Full medical coverage through the company's executive plan, which includes coverage for pre-existing conditions and specialist care. Sloan counted off on her fingers. A trust fund for Mia's education, full ride to any university she wants, and when the year is over, a severance package of $500,000. Evan's knees went weak. That's what your cooperation is worth to me. Sloan returned to her desk, pulling out another document. The contract is simple. We marry immediately. Small ceremony, legal witnesses. You move into my penthouse to establish cohabitation. We attend family dinners, board meetings, and company events as a married couple. We maintain the appearance of a genuine relationship. For a year. For a year. After that, we divorce quietly, citing irreconcilable differences. You walk away financially stable, I retain control of the company, and we both get what we need. Evan sank back into the chair. His mind was racing, trying to find the catch, the hidden trap in this impossible offer. Why me? He asked finally. You could have anyone. Someone from your world, someone with connections and agendas. Sloan shook her head. I chose you because you're invisible. No powerful family, no business ties, no ulterior motives beyond survival. You're desperate enough to agree, but principled enough not to extort me later. She paused. And you already proved you're not easily bought when you returned my money. That was $500. This is my entire life you're talking about restructuring. Yes, which is why I'm giving you 24 hours to decide. Sloan handed him a business card with a phone number handwritten on the back. Call me before midnight tomorrow with your answer. If you agree, we'll move forward immediately. If you refuse, we never speak of this again, and your employment here continues as normal. Evan took the card, his fingers numb. And if I tell someone? You won't. Sloan's certainty was absolute. Because you're a good father, and good fathers don't gamble with their children's futures. It should have sounded like a threat. Instead, it sounded like the truth. Evan stood on shaking legs. I need to go. Of course, Sloan walked him to the door. One more thing. He turned. Your daughter stays out of this, completely. Sloan's voice was firm. The press, the public attention, none of it touches her. She continues her normal life, normal school, normal routine. That's non-negotiable. Something in Evan's chest loosened slightly. Agreed. Sloan nodded, satisfied. Call me tomorrow, Mr. Cole. And think carefully. This kind of opportunity doesn't come twice. The subway ride home was a blur. Evan sat in the nearly empty car, the business card burning a hole in his pocket, and watched the darkness outside the windows swallow station after station. 1 year, one lie, one chance to save everything. His apartment building was exactly as he'd left it that morning. Peeling paint, broken buzzer, the smell of garbage from the alley mixing with someone's late-night cooking. Evan climbed the 4 flights of stairs because the elevator had been broken for 3 weeks and let himself into the cramped 2-bedroom that was home. The babysitter, Mrs. Chen from 3B, was asleep on the couch. Evan paid her $30 from his wallet, money he couldn't spare but couldn't not spend, and locked the door behind her. Mia's room was dark except for the nightlight shaped like a crescent moon. She slept on her side, one hand tucked under her cheek, her breathing soft and even. Evan stood in the doorway and watched her. This small person who'd made him someone worth being, who trusted him to keep her safe and fed and happy. The heart surgery pamphlet was in his bedside drawer, folded and refolded so many times the creases were starting to tear. He pulled it out now, reading words he'd memorized weeks ago. Recommended intervention timeline, 18 to 24 months from diagnosis. Mia had been diagnosed 22 months ago. Evan sat on the edge of his bed and pulled out Sloan's business card. The number was written in confident strokes. No hesitation, no second guessing. Pretend to be someone's husband. Live a lie. Perform happiness for strangers and cameras and a board of directors who would tear them apart if they knew the truth. He thought about the bills on his counter, the surgery Mia would need, the future he couldn't give her on his own. He thought about Sarah, about the promises he'd made in a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and despair. Take care of her. Give her everything. Don't let her struggle like we did. Evan looked at the card for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and typed a message to the number. "I need to ask you something first." The response came 30 seconds later. "Ask." Evan's fingers hovered over the screen. Then he typed, "If we do this, do we share a bed?" The three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Only when necessary for appearances." Evan stared at those words. Clinical, practical. Exactly what he should have expected from someone like Sloane Hart. He typed back, "One more condition. When this is over, you don't contact Mia. Ever." She doesn't need to wonder why her dad's wife disappeared. The response was immediate. "Agreed." "Do we have a deal, Mr. Cole?" Evan closed his eyes. He thought about Mia's gap-toothed smile, her trust, her future. He typed, "Yes." The next morning, Evan called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. He dropped Mia at school, kissed her forehead, and told her he loved her. She asked why he looked tired. He said he'd just had a long night at work. She believed him completely. At 10 a.m., a black car arrived at his building. The driver, professional and silent, handed him an address on a folded piece of paper. Evan got in the back seat, watching his neighborhood disappear through tinted windows. The law office was in Midtown, all glass and steel and whispered conversations. Sloane was already there, dressed in a charcoal suit, looking like she'd just walked out of a boardroom. She acknowledged Evan with a nod. "You came." "I said I would." "People say a lot of things." Sloane handed him a pen. "The contracts are ready. Read everything before you sign." The next hour was a blur of legal terminology and binding clauses, financial disclosures, confidentiality agreements, terms of dissolution. Evan's head spun, but he read every word, asked every question, made sure he understood exactly what he was agreeing to. The marriage license was signed in a courthouse that afternoon, witnessed by two of Sloane's lawyers who smiled like they performed this service every Tuesday. The judge was efficient, no romance, no poetry, just the legal minimum to make it binding. "You may kiss the bride," she said without inflection. Sloane and Evan looked at each other. Neither moved. "That won't be necessary," Sloane told the judge. They signed the final papers as husband and wife. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun was too bright. Evan felt like he'd just signed away something vital, some part of himself he couldn't name but would definitely miss later. "The movers will transfer your essential belongings to the penthouse this evening," Sloane said, checking her phone. "Mia's school schedule won't change, but I've arranged for a car service to handle drop-off and pickup. You'll need to brief her tonight." "I'll tell her you're my girlfriend," Evan said. "That we're dating. I can't tell her we got married." "Fine. As long as the public story is consistent." Sloane's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and frowned. "Grant wants to have dinner tomorrow night. Family introduction." "Already?" "He's suspicious by nature. We need to perform well." Sloane looked up at him, and Evan saw the calculation in her eyes. "Can you do this? Can you make people believe you're in love with me?" Evan thought about Mia's surgery, the trust fund, the future. "I can do whatever I need to do." "Good." Sloane's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those gray eyes. Relief, maybe, or recognition. "Then let's go home." Home. The word sounded strange coming from her mouth. The black car drove them to a building Evan had only seen in magazines, one of those luxury high-rises where doormen wore uniforms, and the lobby had actual art on the walls. The penthouse took up the entire top floor, accessible only by private elevator. The doors opened directly into the apartment. Evan stepped out and tried not to stare. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The furniture was modern and expensive, all clean lines and neutral colors. Everything looked like it belonged in a museum, untouched by human life. "Your room is down the hall, second door on the left," Sloane said, already moving toward what was presumably her own bedroom. "The guest room has been converted to a child's room for Mia. You can redecorate it however she likes. My bedroom is off limits unless we have guests or need to maintain appearances." "Where will I tell Mia you sleep?" "Tell her we're still getting to know each other, that we're taking things slow." Sloane paused at her doorway. Children understand that concept, don't they? Mia will. Evan looked around the pristine space. This doesn't look like a home. That's because it's not. It's a residence. Sloane's voice was matter-of-fact. Home is a concept for people who have time for sentiment. I have a company to run. She disappeared into her room, the door closing with a decisive click. Evan stood alone in the penthouse, surrounded by luxury he'd never dreamed of touching, and felt more lost than he had in the cramped apartment in Queens. His phone buzzed. A text from Mia's school. Reminder, parent-teacher conference next week. Evan typed back confirmation, then walked to the window and looked out at the city spreading beneath him like a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. Somewhere down there, his daughter was learning multiplication and eating cafeteria lunch and trusting that her father knew what he was doing. Evan pressed his hand against the glass. "What did I just do?" he whispered. The city, of course, had no answer. The parent-teacher conference happened on a Tuesday afternoon, in a classroom that still smelled like crayons and hand sanitizer. Evan sat in a chair designed for someone half his size, across from Mrs. Patterson, who'd taught first grade for 23 years and had the kind eyes that saw everything. "Mia's doing wonderfully," Mrs. Patterson said, flipping through a folder of artwork and worksheets. "Her reading comprehension is above grade level, and she's very kind to the other children. A natural leader." Evan felt pride swell in his chest. "That's good to hear. But I wanted to ask about the change in her pickup routine." Mrs. Patterson's voice was gentle, professional. "The car service, is everything all right at home?" There it was. The question Evan had been dreading. "Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually." He forced himself to smile. "I'm seeing someone. She's been helping out with logistics so I can focus more on work." "That's wonderful." Mrs. Patterson's warmth seemed genuine. Mia mentioned her father has a friend named Sloane. She seems quite taken with the idea. Evan's throat tightened. "She's a good kid." "She is, and she clearly adores you." Mrs. Patterson closed the folder. "Just make sure whatever changes are happening, Mia knows she's the priority. 6-year-olds are more perceptive than we give them credit for." The words followed Evan out of the school, into the black car that now waited for him like a silent guardian, back to the penthouse that still didn't feel real. Sloane was in the living room when he arrived, working on her laptop, a glass of wine untouched beside her. She glanced up briefly. "How was the conference?" "Good. Mia's doing well." Evan set down his bag. "Her teacher asked about the car service." "What did you tell her?" "That you're my girlfriend, that you're helping out." Sloane nodded, returning her attention to the screen. "Consistent with our story. Good." Evan watched her for a moment, the way she held herself, rigid and controlled even in her own home. "Do you ever relax?" "Relaxation is inefficient." That's not an answer. Sloane looked up again, this time with something that might have been curiosity. "Why do you care?" "Because we're living together. Because you're about to meet my daughter." Evan moved closer, keeping his distance but making his point. "Because if we're going to convince anyone this is real, we should probably act like we know each other." "We know enough." "We know facts. That's different from knowing a person." Sloane closed her laptop with deliberate care. "What do you want to know, Evan?" It was the first time she'd used his first name without the buffer of Mr. Cole. The intimacy of it felt strange, unearned. "Why does Grant hate you so much?" Sloane's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes, something old and sharp. "Grant doesn't hate me. He resents me. There's a difference." "Explain it to me." She stood, walking to the window, her silhouette framed against the city lights. "My father had 2 children. Grant was born first, the heir apparent, golden child. Then I came along unplanned, unwanted by my mother, tolerated by my father because he believed in appearances." Her voice was clinical, reciting facts. "Grant was groomed for leadership. Private schools, networking events, board meetings from age 12. I was groomed for marriage, etiquette lessons, charity work, the appropriate hobbies for a future philanthropist's wife. But you didn't follow the script." "No. I watched Grant squander every opportunity, coast on the family name, make connections instead of competence his currency. And I watched my father pretend not to notice." Sloane turned from the window. So I made myself indispensable. I learned the business inside and out. I took the failing European division and turned it profitable in 18 months. I proved I was better at this than Grant could ever be. And your father still put that marriage clause in his will. My father believed Grant would eventually mature into the role. He believed I would eventually accept my place. The bitterness in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. He was wrong on both counts. Evan absorbed this, seeing Sloane Hart in a slightly different light, not just ice and strategy, but someone who'd spent a lifetime fighting for recognition that should have been freely given. Grant's going to try to destroy this, Evan said quietly. You know that, right? I'm counting on it. Sloane's smile was thin, predatory. Grant's weakness is his arrogance. He'll assume you're an easy target, someone he can buy or intimidate. He'll overplay his hand. And when he does, we'll be ready. The certainty in her voice should have been reassuring. Instead, it reminded Evan that he was playing a game where everyone else knew the rules except him. His phone buzzed, a text from the babysitter. Mia wants to know if she can have a sleepover at the new place this weekend. Evan typed back. Let me check. He looked at Sloane. Mia wants to come here this weekend, stay overnight. That was always part of the arrangement. I know, but... Evan hesitated. This place isn't exactly child-friendly. There's nothing here that says a kid lives here part-time. Sloane considered this. Then fix it. Redecorate her room however she wants. Make it feel like hers. With what budget? There is no budget. Buy whatever she needs. Sloane pulled out her wallet and handed him a black credit card. This is yours for household expenses. Don't abuse it, but don't hesitate to use it for Mia's needs. Evan stared at the card like it might bite him. I can't just... You can. You're my husband. It would look strange if you didn't have access to funds. Sloane's tone was matter of fact. Besides, a happy child is a convincing detail. If Mia is comfortable here, the illusion is stronger. Everything was calculation with her. Everything was strategy. Evan took the card because refusing it would be stupid, but he hated how easily luxury could become normal, how quickly he could forget what $500 used to mean to him. I'll take her shopping this weekend, he said. Good. And Evan? Sloane's voice stopped him as he turned to leave. Don't thank me. This isn't generosity, it's investment. He left without responding, heading to his room, the guest room that was somehow his now, and sat on the bed that was too soft, too expensive, too far from everything he knew. His phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from a number he didn't recognize. Congratulations on the marriage. We should talk. Grant Hart. Evan's blood went cold. He showed the message to Sloane, who read it without visible reaction. He's faster than I expected, she said. Don't respond. Let him wait. He knows where I work. He can find me whenever he wants. He can try. Sloane's smile was razor sharp. But you're under my protection now. Grant knows that making a move against you is making a move against me. And that stops him? No, but it makes him careful. Sloane handed back his phone. The dinner tomorrow night. Be prepared. Grant will probe for weaknesses. He'll try to separate us, get you alone, ask questions designed to trap you in contradictions. So what do? Stick to the truth as much as possible. We met at the office. We connected over shared values. We fell in love quickly because when you know, you know. Sloane's voice took on a rehearsed quality. Keep it simple. Don't elaborate. And if you're unsure, defer to me. Defer to you. You're playing the role of a man in love with a powerful woman. Society expects you to be slightly in awe, slightly deferential. Use that. Evan bristled. I'm not going to act like some You're going to act like whatever sells the story. Sloane's voice hardened. Your pride is not more important than the objective. Remember what's at stake. Mia's face flashed in his mind. The surgery. The future. Fine, Evan said. I'll play the part. Good. Sloane's expression softened fractionally. And Evan? Don't underestimate Grant. He's lazy and arrogant, but he's also dangerous when cornered. We need to be careful. It was the first time she'd said we like they were actually a team. The dinner was held at Grant Hart's brownstone in the West Village. the kind of address that screamed old money and older privilege. Sloane and Evan arrived together in her car, a sleek Mercedes that purred rather than roared. "Remember the story?" Sloane said as they pulled up. "We're in love, we're happy. You're nervous meeting my brother but trying to make a good impression." "I am nervous meeting your brother." "Then you're already halfway there." Sloane straightened her dress, something elegant and midnight blue that probably cost more than Evan's monthly salary used to be. "Let me do most of the talking. If Grant asks you direct questions, answer honestly but briefly." They walked to the door together. Sloane's hand found Evan's, her fingers cool and slim. The touch was performative, he knew, but his heart rate kicked up anyway. Grant opened the door himself, all charm and white teeth and eyes that assessed Evan like livestock at auction. "Sloane?" He kissed his sister's cheek with practiced affection. "And you must be the lucky man who finally tamed the Ice Queen." Evan felt Sloane stiffen beside him. "Grant, this is Evan Cole." "Evan, my brother Grant." Evan extended his hand. Grant's grip was firm, testing, holding on just a beat too long. "Evan?" "Pleasure." Grant's smile didn't reach his eyes. Come in, come in. I've been dying to meet the man who swept my sister off her feet so quickly." The brownstone's interior was carefully curated. Expensive, but trying too hard, like someone who'd hired a designer to make them look cultured. Grant led them to a dining room where the table was set for 4. "Hope you don't mind," Grant said, pouring wine. "I invited someone to even out the numbers. She should be here any—" The doorbell rang. Grant's smile widened. "Ah, perfect timing." He returned moments later with a woman on his arm, mid-30s, stunning in a calculated way, wearing a dress that cost more than Mia's entire wardrobe. "This is Vanessa Lee," Grant said. "Vanessa, my sister Sloane, and her new husband, Evan." Vanessa's handshake was limp, her attention already dismissing Evan as irrelevant. "Sloane, darling, I had no idea you were seeing anyone." "It happened quickly," Sloane said, her voice smooth as glass. "Clearly." Vanessa's laugh was wind chimes and condescension. "Grant mentioned you'd gotten married, but I assumed it was some sort of business arrangement. You know how these things go." The air in the room crystallized. Grant's smile was poison and honey. "Vanessa's in mergers and acquisitions," he said, guiding them to their seats. "Very astute about corporate marriages of convenience." Evan felt Sloane's hand tighten on his arm. A warning, a signal. He pulled out her chair, a gesture he'd seen in movies, and was rewarded with a brief flash of approval in her eyes. "Actually," Evan said, settling into his own seat, "there's nothing convenient about falling in love. It's messy and inconvenient and completely worth it." He reached across the table and took Sloane's hand. Her fingers were still cool, but this time they wrapped around his with what felt like gratitude. Grant's eyes narrowed fractionally. "How romantic. Tell me, Evan, how exactly did you two meet?" "At the office," Evan said. "I literally bumped into her in a hallway. She dropped something, I picked it up, and—" He looked at Sloane, letting himself remember that night, the collision, the sealed envelope. "I couldn't stop thinking about her." It wasn't entirely a lie. He had thought about her constantly since that night, with fear, with calculation, with growing curiosity about the woman behind the ice. "Love at first sight?" Vanessa said, her tone dripping skepticism. "How very fairy tale." "Not first sight," Sloane corrected, her voice soft but firm. "First conversation. Evan returned something to me when most people would have kept it. That kind of integrity is rare. And worth marrying over." Grant leaned back, wineglass in hand. "Seems like a rather quick escalation." "When you know," Sloane said, echoing the phrase they'd rehearsed. "Why wait?" Dinner arrived, some elaborate multi-course affair that Evan had to navigate carefully, watching which fork Sloane used, mirroring her movements. Grant kept the wine flowing and the questions coming, each one designed to probe for cracks in their story. "What do you do at the company, Evan?" "Marketing, product development division." "And Sloane just happened to need marketing advice at midnight?" "I work late, so does she. Sometimes paths cross." "How convenient." Vanessa jumped in, her voice syrup-sweet. "And what does your family think of all this, Evan? Surely they were surprised by such a whirlwind romance." Evan felt his chest tighten. My wife passed away 3 years ago. It's just me and my daughter now. The table went quiet. Even Grant had the decency to look momentarily uncomfortable. I'm sorry for your loss, Vanessa said, though her eyes said she was calculating how to use this information. Thank you, Evan looked at Sloane. But I'm grateful for second chances. Not everyone gets them. Sloane's expression softened, genuinely, he thought, though it was hard to tell. Grant recovered quickly, pivoting to business talk, company politics, thinly veiled criticisms of Sloane's recent decisions wrapped in brotherly concern. Evan watched the dynamic play out. Grant needling, Sloane parrying, both of them locked in a dance they'd probably been performing since childhood. The European expansion was risky, Grant was saying. Father would have been more cautious. A father isn't here to voice his opinion, Sloane replied coolly, and the European division is now our highest earner. Results speak louder than caution. True, though I wonder what he'd think of his daughter's rather sudden marriage. Grant's smile was all teeth. He was so traditional about these things. Father's opinions are no longer relevant to my personal life. Aren't they? Grant leaned forward. His will certainly seems to think otherwise. The challenge hung in the air like smoke. Evan felt Sloane's posture shift, preparing for battle. The will stipulates marriage, she said. It says nothing about the timeline. I'm in full compliance. Of course you are. You've always been good at following rules to the letter while violating their spirit. Grant's gaze slid to Evan. Must be exhausting, being married to someone so exacting. Actually, Evan said, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice, I find it refreshing. Sloane knows what she wants and goes after it. There's no game playing, no hidden agendas. How modern! Vanessa's laugh was glass-breaking. Though I imagine the prenuptial agreement was quite thorough. Sloane's hand found Evan's under the table, squeezing hard enough to hurt. We trust each other, Evan said simply. Some relationships are built on that instead of legal protection. Grant's expression flickered, annoyance maybe, or respect. It was hard to tell. The rest of dinner passed in careful verbal warfare, Grant and Vanessa probing, Sloane and Evan deflecting. By the time dessert arrived, Evan's jaw ached from forced smiles, and his head pounded from wine he'd barely touched. I should check on Mia, he said, pulling out his phone. Her bedtime was an hour ago. Of course, Grant said, his tone suggesting this was exactly the kind of weakness he'd been looking for. Family first, how admirable. Evan stepped into the hallway, grateful for the momentary escape. He texted the babysitter, received confirmation that Mia was asleep, and leaned against the wall trying to catch his breath. He's good, a voice said. Evan looked up. Vanessa stood in the hallway, her expression unreadable. Excuse me? Grant, he's good at making people uncomfortable. Vanessa moved closer, her perfume expensive and overwhelming. But you held up well, better than I expected. Thanks, I think. Word of advice? Vanessa's voice dropped. Whatever deal you made with Sloane, make sure you have an exit strategy. The Hart family destroys everyone who gets close to them. It's not personal. It's just what they do. Before Evan could respond, Sloane appeared in the hallway. There you are, she said, her eyes moving between Evan and Vanessa. Everything all right? Fine, Evan said. Just checking on Mia. Vanessa smiled, all innocence. I was just keeping him company. You have a good one here, Sloane. Don't lose him. She glided back to the dining room, leaving them alone. What did she say to you? Sloane's voice was quiet, controlled. Nothing important, just friendly advice. Evan looked at her. Can we leave? Not yet. We need to stay long enough that leaving doesn't look like retreat. Sloane's hand found his again, and this time the touch felt less like performance and more like anchoring. 30 more minutes. Can you manage? Evan thought about Mia, asleep in their old apartment, trusting him to make the right choices. Yeah, he said. I can manage. They returned to the dining room together, presenting a united front. Grant watched them with calculating eyes, and Evan realized this was just the opening round. The real fight hadn't even started yet. But the car ride home was silent. Sloane stared out the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. Evan could feel the tension radiating off her in waves. "You did well tonight," she said finally. "So did you." Grant suspects. Of course he suspects. But suspecting isn't the same as proving. Evan loosened his tie. "Vanessa said something interesting. She told me to have an exit strategy." Sloane's laugh was humorless. "Vanessa has been trying to position herself as Grant's wife for 2 years. She sees threats everywhere. Is she right? Should I have an exit strategy?" Sloane turned to look at him directly. "You have one. It's called the contract. 1 year, then we're done. That's your exit." "And what's yours?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Uncertainty, maybe, or fear. "I don't need one," she said. "This is my life. There's nothing to exit from." The car pulled up to their building. They rode the elevator in silence, the space between them feeling wider than it had hours ago. In the penthouse, Sloane kicked off her heels and poured herself a drink, something amber and expensive. She didn't offer one to Evan. "Grant will make a move soon," she said, staring into the glass. "Tonight was reconnaissance. Next time will be an attack." "What kind of attack?" "I don't know yet, but he'll try to separate us, get you alone, make you an offer." Sloane took a long drink. "He'll probably offer you money to disappear, or threaten you, maybe both. And when he does, you tell me immediately, and you record everything." Sloane pulled out her phone, tapping something quickly. "I'm having a recording app installed on your phone. Keep it running whenever you're in Grant's presence." Evan felt a chill run down his spine. This is really happening. The corporate espionage, the family warfare, it's not just some theoretical threat. No, it's very real. Sloane set down her glass and faced him fully. "And I need to know you understand what you're caught in the middle of. This isn't just about a marriage clause anymore. Grant sees you as a weapon he can use against me. That makes you a target. I can handle myself. Can you?" Sloane's voice was sharp. "You're a good father and a decent person, Evan, but you're not equipped for this kind of fight. Grant has resources, connections, and absolutely no conscience. He will find your weaknesses and exploit them without hesitation." "Then teach me." Evan moved closer, holding her gaze. "If I'm going to be your husband, even a fake one, then I need to know how to fight these battles. I need to understand the rules of your world." Sloane studied him for a long moment. "Why?" "Because Mia is depending on me to see this through, and because—" He paused, surprised by what he was about to say. "Because you shouldn't have to fight alone." Something shifted in Sloane's expression, a crack in the ice, brief but unmistakable. "All right," she said quietly. "We start tomorrow. I'll teach you everything you need to know about surviving in my family." She headed toward her bedroom, then stopped at the door. "Evan?" "Yeah?" "Thank you, for tonight, for playing the role convincingly." Her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "You could have made this much harder." "We're in this together," Evan said. "Might as well make it work." Sloane nodded and disappeared into her room. Evan stood alone in the living room, the city lights painting shadows across the floor, and wondered when exactly playing a role had started feeling like something more complicated than pretending. His phone buzzed, a text from Grant. "Nice to meet you tonight. Let's have lunch, just us. I'd like to get to know my new brother-in-law." Evan stared at the message, then forwarded it to Sloane. Her response came immediately. "Don't respond. We'll discuss tomorrow." He set his phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the city that never slept, full of people living their own complicated lies and truths. Somewhere down there, Mia was dreaming, safe and innocent and trusting. Evan pressed his palm against the glass and made a silent promise. Whatever happened next, whatever battles needed fighting, he would see this through. He would protect his daughter's future, even if it meant learning to become someone he didn't quite recognize. The recording app appeared on Evan's phone by morning, installed remotely by someone Sloane trusted. He stared at the small red icon, wondering how his life had become the kind of story where corporate espionage tools lived next to his daughter's school calendar. Sloane was already awake when he emerged from his room, dressed for battle in a charcoal suit, her hair pulled back severe and perfect. She handed him a cup of coffee without looking up from her tablet. "Grant's lunch invitation," she said. "We need to discuss strategy." Evan took the coffee, black, the way he drank it, which meant she'd been paying attention. You think I should go? I think refusing makes you look afraid, but going alone is dangerous. Sloane set down the tablet. He'll choose somewhere public enough to seem innocent, but private enough to speak freely. He'll order expensive wine, make small talk, then go for the throat. And I just sit there and take it? No, you listen, you ask questions. You make him think he's winning. Sloane's eyes were sharp, focused, and you record every word. Evan thought about the man from last night. Charming, calculating, dangerous in the way of people who'd never faced real consequences. What's his angle? What does he actually want from me? Information first. He'll probe for weaknesses in our story, inconsistencies in the timeline. Then he'll offer you money to leave, probably framed as concern for your well-being. Sloane moved to the window, her silhouette outlined against the morning light. When you refuse, and you will refuse, he'll switch to threats. He'll suggest that staying married to me will destroy your reputation, your career, your relationship with your daughter. Will it? Sloane turned, her expression unreadable. That depends on how well we play this. Evan's phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Chen. Mia asking when she can see the new place. Says she wants to show you her art project. The normalcy of it, the simple request from a 6-year-old who just wanted her father's attention, cut through the corporate warfare like a blade. I need to bring Mia here tonight, Evan said. We've been putting it off, but she's starting to ask questions. Then bring her. The room is ready. Sloane's voice softened fractionally. And Evan, when she's here, we maintain the story. I'm your girlfriend. We're taking things slow, but we care about each other. Can you sell that to a 6-year-old? Kids are more perceptive than adults give them credit for. I know. That's why it has to be convincing. Sloane picked up her bag, preparing to leave for the office. I'll have my assistant clear my evening. What time should I be here? The question caught Evan off guard. The idea that Sloane would adjust her schedule, that she'd actually show up for this performance when no board members or family enemies would be watching. 6, he said. She'll want dinner. I'll order something appropriate for children. Sloane paused at the door. Does she have dietary restrictions I should know about? She's 6. She thinks vegetables are a punishment. The corner of Sloane's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Noted. She left, and Evan stood in the empty penthouse, wondering how to explain any of this to his daughter. How to introduce her to a woman who was technically his wife, but functionally a stranger, playing a role in a script neither of them had fully memorized. His phone rang. Unknown number. Evan answered cautiously. Hello? Evan Cole? The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. This is Marcus Webb from the legal department at Hartwell and Associates. We need to schedule a meeting regarding your recent change in marital status and its implications for your employment contract. Evan's blood went cold. What implications? Standard protocol. All employees who marry within the company hierarchy need to sign updated conflict of interest agreements. Nothing to be concerned about. The voice was smooth, practiced. Can you come by my office this afternoon? Say, 2 o'clock? I'll need to check my schedule. Of course, but do try to make it today. These things are time sensitive. A pause. Congratulations on your marriage, by the way. Mrs. Hart is quite a catch. The call ended before Evan could respond. He immediately forwarded the details to Sloane, then called her directly. Legal wants to see me, he said when she answered. Something about conflict of interest forms. That's Grant. Sloane's voice was tight with fury. He's using legal as a pressure point. Marcus Webb reports directly to the executive board, which means he reports to Grant. So I shouldn't go? No, you should absolutely go, but not alone. Evan heard rapid typing on her end. I'm sending my attorney to meet you there. Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and for the love of efficiency, keep that recording app running. Sloane, this is exactly what I warned you about. Grant's not wasting time. Her voice gentled slightly. You're not in this alone, Evan. Remember that. The call ended, leaving Evan standing in borrowed luxury, holding a phone full of spy apps and legal threats, wondering how a simple collision in a hallway had led to corporate warfare. He spent the morning researching conflict of interest policies, reading employment law articles he barely understood, trying to prepare for a meeting he couldn't possibly be prepared for. At 1:30, a text arrived from an unknown number, Catherine Mills. I'm Sloane's attorney. Meet me in the Hartwell lobby at 1:45. Don't go upstairs without me. Evan arrived early, watching professionals stream through the marble lobby in their expensive suits and confident strides. He'd worked here for 2 years and never felt more like an outsider. Catherine Mills appeared at exactly 1:45. Mid-50s, steel gray hair, eyes that missed nothing. She extended a hand. Mr. Cole, I've reviewed your employment contract and the relevant policies. This meeting is pure intimidation theater. Her voice was crisp, efficient. Let me do the talking. If they ask you a direct question, pause before answering. I'll intercede if necessary. Why would they try to intimidate me? Catherine's smile was sharp. Because you married their boss and they're trying to determine if you're a threat or an opportunity. Come on. Marcus Webb's office was on the 15th floor, all dark wood and leather-bound law books that probably hadn't been opened in years. He stood when they entered, his smile professional and empty. Evan, thank you for coming on such short notice. His gaze shifted to Catherine. Ms. Mills, I wasn't aware you'd be joining us. My client has the right to legal representation in any employment-related meeting. Catherine sat without being invited. Shall we proceed? Marcus's smile tightened. Of course. As I mentioned on the phone, this is purely procedural. When an employee marries someone in a senior leadership position, we require updated disclosure forms to prevent conflicts of interest. He slid a document across the desk. Evan glanced at it, pages of dense legal language, clauses and subclauses that could mean anything. Catherine picked it up, scanning quickly. Her expression didn't change, but Evan saw her jaw tighten. This is highly irregular, she said. Section 4 requires Mr. Cole to disclose all financial arrangements with his spouse, including gifts, loans, and any transfers of property or assets. Standard transparency requirements. Section 7 requires him to recuse himself from any projects or decisions that might benefit his spouse's divisions. Mr. Cole works in marketing for product development. Mrs. Hart oversees corporate strategy. Their work doesn't overlap. Nevertheless, the appearance of impropriety, Section 12, Catherine continued, her voice cutting like a scalpel, requires Mr. Cole to report any conversations with his spouse regarding company business, strategy, or personnel decisions. You're essentially asking him to spy on his own wife. Marcus spread his hands in a gesture of reasonableness. We simply need to protect the company's interests. I'm sure you understand. What I understand is that this document was drafted specifically to create an impossible situation. Catherine set down the papers. My client will not be signing this. Then he'll need to resign his position. Company policy is clear. Employees who refuse to sign required compliance documents cannot remain employed. Evan felt the trap snap shut. Resign or betray Sloane. Those were the options Grant was offering. Actually, Catherine said, pulling out her own document, I have a counteroffer. Mr. Cole will sign a standard conflict of interest agreement, the same one signed by the 17 other employees currently married to or partnered with senior leadership. No special provisions, no surveillance requirements, just basic ethical guidelines. Marcus's expression flickered. Surprise, then calculation. I'll need to review that with the board. You do that. In the meantime, Mr. Cole remains employed under his current contract. Catherine stood. Thank you for your time, Mr. Webb. Do send our regards to whoever actually wrote that unconscionable document you tried to make my client sign. She walked out, and Evan followed, his heart hammering. In the elevator, Catherine allowed herself a small smile. He'll report back to Grant within the hour. Grant will be furious that the gambit failed, which means he'll escalate. Escalate how? That depends on how desperate he's getting. Catherine handed Evan her card. Keep your phone on. If anyone from the company contacts you, anyone at all, call me first. And tell Sloane to watch her back. Grant's moving faster than I expected. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby. Catherine disappeared into the crowd, leaving Evan alone with the uncomfortable realization that he was now genuinely embedded in a war he didn't fully understand. His phone buzzed. Grant, lunch tomorrow, noon at the Harrison. Looking forward to getting to know you better. Evan stared at the message, then typed back, See you there. He forwarded it to Sloane, then headed home. Except home wasn't the cramped apartment in Queens anymore. Home was a penthouse full of expensive furniture and a woman who measured relationships in strategic value. Home was wherever Mia would be tonight, looking at him with those trusting eyes, believing in the story he was selling. The thought made his chest ache. Mia arrived at 6:15, exploding through the penthouse door like a small hurricane of energy and questions. "Dad, this place is huge. Is this really where you live now? Where's my room? Can I see the city? Is Sloan here?" Evan caught her in a hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Slow down, sweetheart. Yes, this is where I live now. Your room is down the hall. And yes, Sloan's here." Sloan emerged from the kitchen, and Evan saw her through Mia's eyes, tall, elegant, slightly intimidating in casual clothes that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Hi," Sloan said, and Evan heard the uncertainty in her voice, the unfamiliarity with children evident in her posture. Mia studied her with the unfiltered assessment only 6-year-olds could manage. "You're pretty. Are you my dad's girlfriend?" "I am." Sloan glanced at Evan, seeking guidance. "Do you make him happy?" The question hung in the air, impossibly complex for something asked so simply. Sloan knelt down to Mia's level, a gesture that looked awkward but genuine. "I try to. Does that matter to you?" "Yeah. Dad's been sad since Mom died. I don't like when he's sad." Evan felt his throat tighten. He'd thought he'd hidden it better, the grief and exhaustion and constant fear of failing her. "I don't like when he's sad either," Sloan said quietly. "So maybe we can work together on that." Mia considered this with the seriousness of a Supreme Court justice, then nodded. "Okay. Can I see my room now?" The room had been transformed. Evan had spent Saturday afternoon with Mia picking out furniture, paint colors, decorations, but seeing it fully assembled took his breath away. The walls were lavender, Mia's favorite color. There was a reading nook with shelves full of books, a desk for homework, a bed with a canopy draped in fairy lights. Mia's gasp was pure joy. "It's perfect!" She ran to explore every corner while Evan stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by the reality of it. His daughter, in this space, making it real. Sloan appeared beside him. "Is it all right?" she asked quietly. "The decorator sent photos, but I wasn't sure." "It's perfect," Evan said. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. It's just—" Sloan stopped, watching Mia discover a stuffed animal collection that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. It's what needed to happen. But her eyes told a different story, something softer, more uncertain. Dinner was pizza, Mia's choice, eaten at the massive dining table that had probably never seen cardboard boxes and paper plates before. Mia talked nonstop, telling Sloan about school, her friends, her favorite books, her art project about outer space. Sloan listened with an intensity that suggested she was memorizing every word, cataloging details like she did with business reports. "Do you have a job?" Mia asked between bites of pepperoni. "I do. I run a company." "Like, you're the boss?" "Yes." "That's cool. I want to be a boss when I grow up. Or an astronaut. Or maybe both." Mia tilted her head. "Do you like being the boss?" Sloan paused, and Evan saw her consider the question seriously. "Sometimes. It's complicated." "Why?" "Because being in charge means making hard decisions that not everyone agrees with. It means being responsible when things go wrong." "That sounds lonely," Mia said, with the casual wisdom of children. Sloan's expression flickered. Surprise, recognition. "Sometimes it is." "You should get a dog. Dogs make everything better." "I travel too much for a dog." "Then you should spend more time with Dad and me. We're good company." Mia said it with complete confidence, like the solution was obvious. Evan watched Sloan process this, saw something shift in her carefully controlled features. A crack in the armor, brief but unmistakable. "I'll consider that," Sloan said softly. After dinner, Mia wanted to show them her art project, a solar system made from painted styrofoam balls and wire hangers. She hung it carefully in her new room while explaining the orbital mechanics she'd learned in first grade, most of it wildly inaccurate but delivered with absolute authority. "Time for bed," Evan said eventually, checking his watch. "But I'm not tired." Mia's protest was automatic, undermined by the yawn that followed. "Bed, you've got school tomorrow." Mia hugged Sloane without warning, a spontaneous gesture that clearly caught Sloane off guard. Thank you for my room. It's the best room ever. Sloane's arms came up slowly, carefully, returning the hug with the uncertainty of someone unfamiliar with physical affection. You're welcome. Evan tucked Mia into her new bed, reading her favorite story, a worn picture book about a brave mouse and a reluctant dragon. She was asleep before the dragon learned to be kind, her breathing soft and steady. He found Sloane in the living room, staring out at the city with a glass of wine in her hand. She's asleep, he said. She's lovely, bright, curious, kind. Sloane didn't turn from the window. You've done a good job with her. I'm trying. It shows. Sloane took a sip of wine. I wasn't prepared for how disarming children can be. How honest. Evan moved to stand beside her, both of them reflected in the glass against the city lights. She liked you. She doesn't know me. She knows you made her father smile. That's enough for now. Sloane finally looked at him, and Evan saw exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of carrying too much for too long. The lunch with Grant tomorrow. Are you ready? As ready as I can be? Evan pulled out his phone, showing her the recording app. Catherine showed me how to use this properly. Everything will be documented. Good. But Evan, Sloane's voice was serious. Grant will try to get under your skin. He'll say things about me, about our marriage, about your daughter. Things designed to make you angry or scared or defensive. And I should stay calm. You should remember why you're doing this. Remember what's at stake. She set down her wine glass. And if he threatens Mia in any way, even indirectly, you tell me immediately. The protective edge in her voice surprised him. You think he'd go that far? I think Grant has no limits when it comes to getting what he wants. Which is why we need to be smarter, faster, and always one step ahead. Sloane turned to face him fully. After tomorrow, he'll know you're not an easy target. That's when things will get truly dangerous. What aren't you telling me? Sloane hesitated, and in that pause, Evan saw fear. Real, genuine fear beneath all the control and strategy. My father's will contest hearing is in 3 weeks. If Grant can prove the marriage is fraudulent before then, he wins everything. The company, the shares, control of the foundation, all of it. Her voice dropped. And he'll make sure I'm not just defeated, but destroyed. That's how he operates. Then we don't give him proof. It's not that simple. He'll manufacture evidence, twist facts, pay people to testify against us. Sloane's hands curled into fists. The lunch tomorrow is just reconnaissance. The real attack is coming, and I don't know what form it will take. Evan thought about Mia, asleep in the next room, trusting him to keep her safe and secure. He thought about the surgery she needed, the future she deserved, the promises he'd made in hospital rooms and midnight fevers. We'll figure it out, he said. Together. Sloane studied him for a long moment. You're different than I expected. How so? I thought you'd be intimidated by all this. Overwhelmed. Looking for exits. She tilted her head slightly. But you're adapting. Learning the game. Almost like you belong here. I don't belong here, but I'm good at surviving impossible situations. Evan met her eyes. Single parenthood on poverty wages teaches you that. Something flickered in Sloane's expression. Respect, maybe, or understanding. I chose better than I knew. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither of them wanted to name. Then Sloane's phone buzzed, shattering it. She checked the screen and her face went pale. What is it? A board member just leaked our marriage certificate to a business gossip column. Sloane scrolled rapidly, her jaw tightening. The article goes live at midnight. By morning, every major news outlet will have picked it up. Is that bad? It's catastrophic. We're not ready for this level of scrutiny. Our story has holes, our timeline is suspicious, and now we'll have reporters digging into every aspect of our lives. Sloane looked up, and Evan saw panic. Real, unfiltered panic. They'll investigate you, interview your neighbors, talk to Mia's school. Everything we've tried to keep private will be dragged into the light. Evan's stomach dropped. Mia will be protected. I promise you that. Sloane was already typing rapidly. I'm calling in every favor I have to keep the media away from her school. But Evan, you need to understand what's about to happen. Your life as you knew it is over. Tomorrow, you'll wake up as the man who married one of the most powerful women in the city. Every decision you've made, every relationship you've had, every mistake, it all becomes public property. The weight of it crashed over Evan like a wave. He thought about his old apartment, his anonymous life, the blessed invisibility of being nobody important. I can't let Mia see me scared, he said quietly. Then don't be scared, be prepared. Sloane's voice steadied, the panic receding behind her usual control. We tell our story first on our terms. I'll arrange an interview with a friendly journalist, someone who owes me. We control the narrative before it controls us. And if Grant has already poisoned the well, then we poison it right back. Sloane's smile was sharp, dangerous. You're about to learn something about surviving in my world, Evan. When they come for you, you don't hide. You fight. Evan looked at the woman who was technically his wife, seeing her clearly for maybe the first time. Not just the ice and strategy, but the survivor underneath, the fighter who'd spent a lifetime refusing to be dismissed or defeated. Then teach me how to fight, he said. Sloane held his gaze, and in her eyes, Evan saw something shift. A decision being made, a line being crossed. All right, she said, but you need to trust me, completely. Can you do that? Evan thought about Mia, about the surgery, about the impossible situation he'd already committed to. He thought about the woman in front of him who'd kept every promise she'd made so far, who'd protected his daughter without being asked, who was offering him a chance to be something more than a drowning man clinging to debris. Yes, he said, I trust you. Sloane nodded, satisfaction flickering across her features. Good, because starting tomorrow the real battle begins, and we're going to need each other to survive it. She walked to her bedroom, pausing at the door to look back at him. Get some sleep, Evan. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. The door closed, leaving Evan alone with the city lights and the weight of everything he'd just agreed to. His phone buzzed. A notification from the gossip site, the article already live despite Sloane's efforts to contain it. The headline screamed across his screen, Ice Queen melts, Sloane Hart's secret marriage to unknown marketing assistant raises questions about company control. Evan read the first paragraph, his stomach sinking with each word. They dug up his employment records, Sarah's death certificate, his financial records. Everything was there, twisted into a narrative of opportunism and gold digging. Another text, this time from a number he didn't recognize. Congratulations on your 15 minutes of fame. Hope it's worth what's coming. V. Vanessa. Helpful to the last. Evan deleted the message and checked on Mia one more time. She slept peacefully, unaware that tomorrow she'd wake up to a father who was suddenly newsworthy, interesting, scrutinized. He stood in her doorway, watching her breathe, and made a silent promise. Whatever happened next, whatever battles needed fighting, he would protect this innocence for as long as humanly possible. Even if it meant becoming someone he barely recognized. Even if it meant the marriage of convenience was starting to feel dangerously like something else entirely. The morning brought chaos wrapped in expensive journalism. Evan's phone started ringing at 6 a.m. Reporters, bloggers, people claiming to be former classmates who barely remembered his name. He silenced it all, focusing instead on the small miracle of making Mia breakfast, while she chattered about a spelling test, blissfully unaware that her father's face was currently circulating on business news websites. Sloane emerged from her room already dressed for war, her suit black and severe, her expression carved from ice. She glanced at Mia, then at Evan, and something in her eyes softened fractionally. The car will take Mia to school through the garage entrance, she said quietly. I've stationed security there to keep photographers away. Photographers? Evan felt his chest tighten. 3 of them showed up at 5:30. Sloane poured herself coffee with mechanical precision. They're camped outside the building. It'll get worse before it gets better. Mia looked up from her cereal, sensing the tension. Is something wrong? Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. Evan forced his voice to stay calm. Just some boring grown-up stuff. Dad has an important meeting today, Sloane added, surprising Evan with the smoothness of her lie. So we're being extra careful about his schedule. Mia accepted this with a shrug and returned to her breakfast. Evan caught Sloane's eye, mouthing a silent thank you. She nodded, barely perceptible. The car ride to school was tense. Evan watched for photographers, for anything that might intrude on Mia's normalcy. But Sloane's security was efficient and invisible, and Mia arrived at school exactly like every other Tuesday, running toward her friends without looking back. "She doesn't know," Evan said as the car pulled away. The driver, a professional who'd clearly been briefed, spoke without turning. "Mrs. Hart has arranged a security detail for the school. Discreet. The child won't notice them." Evan's hands curled into fists. "This is insane." "This is necessary," the driver corrected. "Mr. Hart has proven himself unpredictable. Mrs. Hart is simply being thorough." The implication hung heavy. Grant was dangerous enough that a 6-year-old needed protection. The Harrison was the kind of restaurant where reservations required 6 weeks' notice and connections worth more than money. Grant had chosen it specifically, Evan realized, a power play wrapped in white tablecloths and sommelier recommendations. Evan arrived 10 minutes early, his phone's recording app already running in his jacket pocket. The maitre d' recognized Grant's name and led Evan to a corner table with sight lines to the entire restaurant. Strategic positioning. Everything was calculated. Grant arrived exactly on time, all smiles and designer clothes, drawing attention from other diners who recognized the Hart name. "Evan!" He clasped Evan's hand with practiced warmth. "Thanks for making time. I know you must be swamped with all the media attention. It's been an interesting morning." "I bet." Grant settled into his chair, ordering wine without consulting Evan. "You've become quite the celebrity overnight. How does it feel?" "Overwhelming." "I can only imagine, going from invisible to infamous in 12 hours. Grant's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Though I have to say, the articles are quite unflattering. All that speculation about gold digging and opportunism. Must be hard on your daughter." Evan felt anger spike but forced his voice to stay level. "Mia doesn't read business gossip columns." "Not yet. But kids talk. Their parents talk." Grant leaned back as the sommelier presented the wine. Children can be cruel when they smell weakness. The wine was approved, poured, ignored. Evan kept his hands visible on the table, his posture open but alert. "What do you want, Grant?" "Direct. I appreciate that." Grant swirled his wine thoughtfully. "I want to understand what you're really after, because let's be honest, this marriage makes no sense from your perspective." "I'm in love with your sister." "Please." Grant's laugh was soft, condescending. "You bumped into her in a hallway and 3 weeks later you're married? That's not love, that's desperation. Maybe I recognize something in her that you don't see. What I see is a man drowning in debt who suddenly has access to unlimited resources. What I see is a single father who'd do anything to secure his daughter's future." Grant set down his glass. "What I see is someone who made a deal, not a love match." Evan met his gaze without flinching. "Think whatever you want. It doesn't change the facts." "The facts are what I make them." Grant's voice dropped, losing its practiced charm. "I know about the medical bills. Your wife's cancer treatment, the bankruptcy you barely avoided. I know about your daughter's heart condition and the surgery she needs. I know you're 3 months behind on student loans and your credit score is in the toilet. So you've done your homework. Congratulations." "I've done more than homework. I've built a case." Grant pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. "Financial transfers from Sloane's accounts to yours. The exact timing, 2 days after the marriage license was filed. The house purchase in your daughter's name, the trust fund establishment, the debt erasure. It's all there, documented and time-stamped." Evan's blood went cold, but he kept his expression neutral. "Those are gifts between spouses. Perfectly legal." "Legal, yes, but suspicious as hell when presented to a judge reviewing fraud allegations." Grant leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. In 2 weeks, I'm filing a formal challenge to my father's will. I have affidavits from company employees who'll testify that you and Sloane never interacted before the month she needed to get married. I have financial experts ready to demonstrate a clear pattern of transactional marriage." "You're bluffing." "Am I? Because I also have this." Grant turned his phone around, showing Evan a photograph, the contract signing, taken through the law office window. Evan and Sloane bent over documents, their body language all business, no warmth, no romance. "Photography isn't illegal." "No, but it's compelling evidence when combined with everything else." Grant pocketed his phone. So here's my offer. You walk away now, quietly, and I'll make sure you're taken care of. $500,000, full medical coverage for your daughter, a job at a company that isn't about to be torn apart by legal warfare. You disappear from Sloane's life, and everyone wins. Except Sloane. Sloane made her bed. She thought she could outsmart our father's will, manipulate the system, use you as a puppet. But she underestimated me. Grant's expression hardened. I will bury her, Evan. And if you're standing next to her when I do, you'll be buried too. Evan thought about the recording app, about every word being captured. He thought about Sloane, preparing for battle in her corner office. He thought about Mia, safe at school, trusting her father to make good choices. Your sister isn't what you think she is, Evan said quietly. She's not cold or manipulative. She's fighting for something she earned, something your father should have given her freely. My father knew what he was doing. Your father was a sexist dinosaur who couldn't stand the idea of his daughter being more capable than his son. The words came out sharper than Evan intended, but he didn't regret them. Sloane built that company into what it is. You've just been coasting on her work. Grant's face flushed. You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't I? I've seen the division reports. I know which departments are profitable and which ones are hemorrhaging money. Guess who runs the profitable ones? Evan stood, throwing his napkin on the table. I'm not interested in your money, Grant. I'm not interested in your threats. And I'm definitely not abandoning Sloane to make your life easier. Then you're a fool. Maybe. But I'm a fool who keeps his promises. Evan turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Grant? Everything you just said? I recorded it. Every threat, every bribe, every piece of evidence you think you have. So when this goes to court, the judge will hear exactly what kind of man is trying to steal his sister's company. Grant's expression went from smug to furious in half a second. You're lying. Am I? You want to risk it? Evan pulled out his phone, showing the recording app's running timer. Thanks for lunch. I'll send you the bill for the wine you ordered. He walked out of the Harrison with his heart hammering, his hands shaking, his mind racing through everything that had just happened. Outside, the midday sun was too bright, the street noise too loud. Evan ducked into an alley and called Sloane. It's done, he said when she answered. I got everything. Are you all right? The question surprised him. Not the tactical assessment he'd expected, but genuine concern. I'm okay. Shaken, but okay. Evan leaned against the brick wall, letting adrenaline drain from his system. He showed me surveillance photos. He has people ready to testify against us, and he offered me $500,000 to walk away. Which you refused. Obviously. Sloane was quiet for a moment. Send me the recording immediately. I'll have Catherine review it and prepare our counterattack. A pause. You did well, Evan. Better than I expected. He threatened you. He threatened our whole arrangement. Evan closed his eyes. And he's not bluffing about the will contest. He's going nuclear. Let him. We have ammunition now, too. Sloane's voice was steel wrapped in silk. Come back to the office. We need to strategize. I can't. I have to pick up Mia in 2 hours. Then come to the penthouse after. This can't wait. She hesitated. And Evan, thank you for defending me to Grant. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. The words came out before Evan could stop them. You're my wife. Even if it's fake, I'm not going to let him talk about you like you're some villain. The silence on the other end stretched too long. Sloane? I'll see you tonight, she said quietly, and ended the call. Evan stood in the alley, phone in hand, wondering when exactly the performance had started feeling real, when protecting Sloane's reputation had become about more than just fulfilling a contract. His phone buzzed with incoming texts, the media frenzy continuing, strangers demanding comments, former colleagues suddenly interested in reconnecting. He ignored all of it and headed to Mia's school, desperate for something normal and uncomplicated. But normal was gone. The photographers found him at pickup, shouting questions while he tried to shield Mia from the chaos. Security intervened, creating a barrier, but not before Mia saw the cameras and the crowd. Dad? Her voice was small, scared. What's happening? Nothing, baby. Just some people being nosy. Evan lifted her into his arms despite her protest that she was too big for that now. Let's go home. To the big house? Yeah, to the big house. The car ride back was quiet. Mia pressed against his side, and Evan felt the weight of every decision he'd made, every compromise, every calculated risk that had led them here. At the penthouse, Sloane was waiting. She'd changed into casual clothes, or her version of casual, which still looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. She took one look at Evan's face and understood. "The photographers," she said. "Yeah. I'll have them removed, legally." Sloane crouched down to Mia's level. "Hey, rough day?" Mia nodded, still clinging to Evan's hand. "Want to help me with something?" Sloane asked. "I ordered dinner, but I'm terrible at setting tables. Think you could show me how?" It was so clearly a deflection, a distraction, but Mia took it anyway, grateful for something to do. Evan watched them in the kitchen, Sloane following Mia's very specific instructions about napkin folding and fork placement, and felt something crack in his chest. This was supposed to be simple. A transaction. 1 year, clear boundaries, then back to separate lives. But watching Sloane laugh, actually laugh, at Mia's joke about spoons being the most important utensil, Evan realized nothing about this was simple anymore. They ate dinner together, the three of them, and for a few hours it almost felt real. Mia talked about her day, complained about a boy in her class who kept stealing erasers, demonstrated the dance she'd learned in gym class. Sloane asked questions, engaged, seemed genuinely interested in the minutiae of first-grade politics. After Mia went to bed, Evan found Sloane in her office, surrounded by documents and legal briefs, Catherine on speakerphone walking through Grant's expected legal strategy. "The recording helps," Catherine was saying. "Attempted bribery, coercion, possibly extortion depending on how we frame it. But Evan needs to understand, Grant's going to fight dirty. He'll subpoena friends, family, anyone who can testify about the marriage's authenticity." "My friends barely know about Sloane," Evan said, "and I don't have family except Mia." "What about your late wife's family?" Evan's stomach dropped. "Sarah's parents haven't spoken to me since the funeral. They blamed me for not catching the cancer sooner, for not getting better treatment, for—" He stopped, the old wound still raw. "They won't help us." "They might help Grant," Catherine said bluntly, "if he offers them the chance to paint you as an opportunist who abandoned their daughter's memory for money. That's not— It doesn't matter what's true. It matters what can be proven in court." Catherine's voice was matter-of-fact. "We need to prepare for character assassination, both of you." Sloane ended the call and looked at Evan with something approaching sympathy. "I'm sorry. About your in-laws." "They're grieving. People say terrible things when they're grieving." Evan sank into a chair. "I just never thought it would be weaponized like this." "Everything is a weapon in Grant's hands." Sloane poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handing him one. "But we have weapons too, the recording, for one, and the fact that our story, while unconventional, isn't actually illegal. Just highly suspicious. Suspicion isn't proof." Sloane took a drink. "The will contest hearing is in 2 weeks. Between now and then, we need to present as the most convincing married couple in Manhattan. Public appearances, social media presence, the works." Evan thought about the photographers, the scrutiny, the invasion of privacy. "What about Mia?" "We keep her out of it as much as possible. But Evan—" Sloane's voice was gentle. "She's going to hear things. At school, from other parents. We need to prepare her." "Prepare her for what? That her father's being called a gold digger? That strangers are questioning whether he actually loved her mother?" "No. We prepare her by being consistent with our story. We make sure she knows that you and I care about each other, that this is real to us, that the outside noise doesn't matter." Sloane set down her glass. "Children are resilient, but only if the adults in their lives are steady." Evan looked at this woman who'd studied human behavior like a science, who'd built walls around herself so high that genuine emotion seemed foreign. "When did you get so good at understanding people?" "I'm not good at understanding people. I'm good at predicting behavior." Sloane's smile was sad. "There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because you just calmed down a scared 6-year-old like it was the most natural thing in the world." "That wasn't prediction. That was—" Sloane stopped, seeming surprised by what she was about to say. "That was me actually wanting to help." The admission hung between them, vulnerable and honest. Evan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, just a photograph. Mia's school, taken from across the street, time-stamped from this afternoon. His blood turned to ice. Sloan. She looked at the photo and her expression went deadly. That's a threat. Grant wouldn't actually. Grant is desperate. Desperate people do unconscionable things. Sloan was already making calls, her voice clipped and authoritative. I'm tripling security at Mia's school. She doesn't go anywhere without protection. This is insane. She's 6 years old, which is exactly why we can't take chances. Sloan gripped his arm, forcing him to meet her eyes. I will not let Grant hurt your daughter. Do you understand me? Whatever else happens, Mia stays safe. The fierceness in her voice, the absolute certainty cut through Evan's panic. Okay, he said. Okay. Sloan made 3 more calls to security, to Catherine, to someone Evan didn't recognize, who apparently specialized in discreet protective services. By the time she finished, a plan was in place, comprehensive and bulletproof. Thank you, Evan said when the chaos settled. Don't thank me. I got you into this. Sloan looked exhausted, the armor finally cracking. I knew Grant was vindictive, but I never thought he'd go after a child. He hasn't actually done anything. It's just a photograph. It's a message. He's showing us he can get close to her whenever he wants. Sloane's hands curled into fists. That ends now. She walked to the window, staring out at the city with an expression Evan couldn't read. My father used to say that business is war, she said quietly. That the only difference between corporate boardrooms and battlefields is that boardrooms have better coffee. She turned to face him. I always thought he was being dramatic, but Grant learned from him, and Grant has no conscience to restrain him. So what do? We go to war. Sloane's voice was ice and fire. We stop playing defense and start attacking. We find every skeleton in Grant's closet, every shady deal, every ethical violation, and we make sure the board knows exactly what kind of man is trying to take control of the company. You have that kind of ammunition? I have suspicions. I need proof. Sloan pulled out her laptop. Which is where you come in. Me? Grant underestimates you. He sees a desperate single father, not a threat. That's his weakness. Sloan opened a file showing Evan financial records, email chains, meeting notes. You're going to help me find the proof we need to destroy him. Evan looked at the evidence of corporate warfare laid out on a laptop screen and realized he'd crossed a line somewhere between the contract signing and this moment. He wasn't just playing a role anymore. He was invested in Sloane's survival, in this battle, in the woman who'd just promised to protect his daughter without hesitation. Where do we start? He asked. Sloane's smile was razor-sharp and beautiful. We start with the European division. 3 years ago, Grant oversaw an acquisition that lost the company $40 million. The official story is market conditions, but I've always suspected something darker. They worked through the night, digging through records, following money trails, connecting dots that painted a picture of incompetence at best, fraud at worst. Somewhere around 2 a.m., Evan's phone buzzed with another message. This time it was from Marcus Webb in legal. Emergency board meeting scheduled for Thursday. Your presence required. Failure to attend will result in immediate termination. Evan showed it to Sloan. She read it and laughed, a sound without humor. He's accelerating the timeline, probably spooked by the recording from lunch, she typed rapidly. Catherine will handle this. But Evan, this meeting is where Grant will make his case. He'll present his evidence, call his witnesses, try to prove the marriage is fraudulent. In front of the entire board. Yes, which means we need to be flawless, united, completely convincing as a married couple. Sloan looked up at him. Can you do that? Can you stand in front of 15 of the most powerful people in the industry and make them believe you love me? Evan thought about everything he'd learned about Sloan over the past weeks. Her loneliness disguised as efficiency. Her vulnerability hidden behind strategy. The way she'd crouch down to talk to Mia at eye level. The fierce protectiveness in her voice when she'd promised to keep his daughter safe. Yeah, he said quietly. I can do that. Sloan held his gaze and something passed between them. Understanding, recognition, something neither of them wanted to name. Good, she said, because Thursday is going to be brutal. She was right. Thursday arrived like a freight train, dragging chaos and scrutiny in its wake. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m., which gave Grant exactly enough time to leak details to the press. By noon, every business news outlet was running stories about the emergency session, speculating about fraud investigations and family warfare. Evan dressed carefully in the suit Sloan had bought him, navy, expensive, tailored to fit perfectly, armor for a battle fought with words instead of weapons. Mia was at school, surrounded by security she didn't know existed. Evan had kissed her goodbye that morning and lied about where he'd be that afternoon. The guilt of it sat heavy in his chest. Sloan emerged from her room looking like she'd been forged from steel. Charcoal suit, hair pulled back severe, makeup minimal and perfect. She looked at Evan and nodded approval. "Ready?" she asked. "No, but I'm going anyway." That's all courage really is, doing the thing that terrifies you because the alternative is worse. She handed him a folder. "Our story, refined and bulletproof. Memorize the timeline. Every date, every detail. Grant will try to catch you in contradictions." They rode to Hartwell and Associates in tense silence, Catherine meeting them in the lobby with last-minute instructions and warnings. The boardroom was on the 30th floor, all glass and power, 15 chairs arranged around a table that had seen decades of corporate warfare. Grant was already there, flanked by lawyers and looking smug. The board members filed in, men and women in expensive suits, carrying the weight of billions in assets and decisions that could reshape industries. Richard Castellano, the board chairman, called the meeting to order with grim efficiency. "We're here to address serious allegations regarding the validity of Mrs. Hart's marriage and its compliance with the late Mr. Hart's will stipulations." He looked at Sloan with something approaching sympathy. "Mr. Grant Hart has requested the opportunity to present evidence of fraudulent marriage for financial gain." Grant stood, theatrical and confident. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief and direct." He wasn't brief. For 45 minutes, he presented his case. Financial records, testimony from employees who'd never seen Evan and Sloan interact before, the photograph of the contract signing, expert analysis of the marriage's suspicious timing. Evan listened to his life being twisted into something ugly and mercenary, his love for Sarah dismissed as ancient history, his relationship with Sloan painted as pure transaction. When Grant finally finished, the board members looked troubled. Several whispered to each other. The atmosphere had shifted from neutral to suspicious. Castellano turned to Sloan. "Mrs. Hart, you have the opportunity to respond." Sloan stood with the kind of calm that only came from absolute certainty. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start by addressing my brother's central argument, that this marriage is fraudulent because it happened quickly and provides me financial benefit under my father's will." She walked to the front of the room, commanding attention without demanding it. "My father's will is sexist and archaic. It assumes unmarried women are incapable of leadership. But I've complied with its requirements nonetheless because this company matters more than my pride." Sloan's voice was steady, clear. "Yes, I married Evan Cole quickly. Yes, the timing benefits me. But that doesn't make our relationship fraudulent. It makes it practical." "Practical isn't romantic," Grant interjected. "No, it's not. But it's honest." Sloan turned to face him. "You want romance? You want the fairy tale? Fine. I'll tell you what actually happened." She returned her attention to the board, and Evan saw her make a decision, to drop the corporate facade and speak like a human being. "I met Evan in a hallway at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night. I was working late because that's what I do. He was working late because he had no choice, single parent, crushing debt, desperate to provide for his daughter. We literally collided, and when I dropped something valuable, he returned it without expecting anything in return." Sloan's voice softened fractionally. "That kind of integrity is rare in my world. So I noticed him, and when my father's will forced me to consider marriage, I thought about that moment, about a man who chose honor over easy money." She pulled out her phone, projecting messages onto the screen behind her, texts between her and Evan, awkward and honest, building a relationship in fragments. "Is this conventional? No. Is it romantic in the traditional sense? Probably not. But it's real." Sloan looked directly at the board members. "I married Evan because he's honest and kind and makes me want to be better than I am. The fact that it also satisfies my father's outdated requirements is just convenient timing. The board members were listening now, actually engaged rather than dismissing. Grant stood again. That's a lovely story, Sloan, but I have evidence that contradicts it. Specifically, I have a recording of you attempting to bribe my husband, Sloan interrupted, offering him $500,000 to abandon me, threatening his daughter, admitting to surveillance and coordinated attacks on our marriage. She nodded at Catherine, who played the audio from Evan's lunch with Grant. The board members' expressions shifted from skeptical to shocked to angry as they listened to Grant's threats and manipulations. When the recording ended, the silence was absolute. That recording was obtained illegally, Grant said, but his confidence was cracking. No, it wasn't. New York is a one-party consent state. Evan had every right to record a conversation he was part of. Catherine's voice was surgical. What we have here is evidence of attempted extortion, intimidation, and misuse of company resources for personal vendetta. Castellano looked at Grant with barely concealed disgust. Is this true? Did you attempt to bribe Mr. Cole? I was protecting the company. You were protecting yourself, Sloane's voice cut like glass. Because you know that if I retain control, your free ride ends. Your expense accounts, your unearned bonuses, your ability to coast on the Hart name while actual leaders do the work, all of it disappears. She pulled up another document, the European acquisition Grant had overseen, the one that lost $40 million. Speaking of protecting the company, let's talk about this disaster. The official story is market conditions, but my investigation found something interesting. Sloan highlighted specific transfers. Money moved through shell companies, kickbacks to individuals with connections to your personal accounts, timing that suggests insider trading. Grant's face went pale. That's speculation. That's evidence I'm turning over to the SEC. Sloane's smile was cold and final. You want to destroy my marriage? Fine. But I will absolutely destroy your freedom. The board erupted in shocked whispers. Castellano called for order, his expression grim. This meeting is adjourned pending full investigation of both allegations. He looked at Grant. You're suspended from all company duties effective immediately. Legal will be in contact. Grant stood frozen, his careful plans collapsing around him. Evan watched it happen with something like awe. Sloane Hart, absolutely devastating in her precision, using Grant's weapons against him with ruthless efficiency. The board members filed out, several stopping to shake Sloane's hand to offer quiet support. Grant left without speaking, his lawyers trailing behind like mourners at a funeral. When the room finally emptied, leaving just Sloane, Evan, and Catherine, the tension broke. That was incredible, Catherine said. Brutal, but incredible. Sloane sank into a chair, the adrenaline finally wearing off. Is it over? For now, the SEC investigation will take months, maybe years, but Grant won't be challenging the will anytime soon. Catherine packed her briefcase. You two should celebrate. You just won. She left, and Evan moved to sit beside Sloane. You okay? He asked. I just destroyed my brother's career, possibly his life. Sloane's voice was hollow. I should feel victorious. Instead, I just feel tired. Evan took her hand without thinking about it, her fingers cold and trembling slightly. He gave you no choice. I know, but that doesn't make it easier. Sloane looked at him, and Evan saw exhaustion and relief, and something else he couldn't name. Thank you for standing with me, for not running when things got ugly. Where else would I go? Evan said, and realized he meant it. They sat in the empty boardroom, holding hands like actual partners, and Evan felt the careful walls they'd built between them start to crack. This was supposed to be temporary. A contract. 1 year. But looking at Sloane, vulnerable and strong, damaged and determined, Evan wondered if they'd already crossed a line neither of them could uncross. His phone buzzed, a text from the school. Mia's asking when you're picking her up. Should we call the backup contact? Reality crashed back. The performance was over. Real life was waiting. I need to get Mia, Evan said. Sloane nodded, releasing his hand. Of course. He stood to leave, then paused. Sloane, what you said in there about me making you want to be better, did you mean that? Or was it just part of the performance? Sloane was quiet for a long moment, looking at him with those gray eyes that saw too much. I don't know anymore, she said honestly. And that terrifies me. Evan left without responding because what could he possibly say to that? The words followed Evan through the elevator ride, through the lobby where reporters still lingered like vultures, through the car ride to Mia's school. I don't know anymore. And that terrifies me. They echoed in the space between his heartbeats, in the silence he couldn't fill with rational thought. Mia bounded out of school with her usual energy, backpack bouncing, completely oblivious to the fact that her father had just helped dismantle a corporate empire. She showed him a drawing she'd made, a house with 3 stick figures standing in front of it. That's you, and that's me, and that's Sloan, she explained, pointing to each figure. We're a family. Evan's throat tightened. That's beautiful, sweetheart. Can we show Sloan when we get home? Home. When had the penthouse become home in Mia's mind? When had 3 stick figures become her definition of family? Yeah, Evan said, his voice rough. We can show her. But when they arrived at the penthouse, Sloan wasn't there. A note on the counter written in her precise handwriting. Board demanded follow-up meetings. We'll be late. Dinner in the fridge. S. Evan heated up the meal Sloan had arranged, something with vegetables Mia would actually eat, which meant Sloan had been paying attention, and tried to focus on homework and bedtime routines instead of the growing knot in his chest. Mia fell asleep clutching the drawing, and Evan stood in her doorway watching her breathe, wondering what happened when the contract ended and this little girl had to say goodbye to someone who'd become important to her. He was still standing there when he heard the front door open. Sloan appeared in the hallway, looking exhausted and beautiful, and completely undone in a way he'd never seen before. Her hair had escaped its severe bun. Her jacket was gone. She looked human. Hey, Evan said quietly. Hey. Sloan glanced at Mia's sleeping form. How was she? Good. She made you something. Evan retrieved the drawing from Mia's nightstand, handed it to Sloan. She stared at the 3 stick figures for a long time, her expression unreadable. She drew us as a family, Sloan said finally. Yeah. That's going to make this harder. When it ends. Evan felt something crack in his chest. When does it end, Sloan? The contract says 1 year, but Grant's done. The board voted to challenge the marriage clause in the will. You've already won. The legal team says we need to maintain the marriage until the will contest is fully resolved. Another 6 months, maybe 8. Sloan set down the drawing carefully, like it was made of glass. But you're right. The immediate threat is gone. They stood in Mia's doorway, not quite looking at each other, the space between them charged with everything they weren't saying. We should talk, Sloan said. Not here. They moved to the living room, the city lights painting shadows across the floor. Sloan poured 2 glasses of wine, handed one to Evan, then stood by the window like she always did when she needed distance. The board meeting today, she began. What I said about you making me want to be better, that wasn't just performance. Evan's heart rate kicked up. Sloan, let me finish. Please. She took a drink, gathering courage. I've spent my entire life being strategic. Every relationship calculated, every interaction measured for maximum efficiency. Emotions were weaknesses to be managed, not experiences to be felt. She turned to face him. And then you walked into my office and refused $500 because it felt wrong to you. Not because it was bad strategy, but because it violated some internal code I didn't understand. That's just basic decency. No, it's not. Most people would have taken the money and justified it. But you couldn't. Because you're fundamentally good in a way I've never been. Sloan's voice was raw, honest. And living with you these past weeks, watching you with Mia, seeing how you navigate the world with kindness instead of calculation, it's made me realize how much I've missed by being this person I've built myself into. Evan set down his wine glass, his hands shaking slightly. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't want this to end. The words came out quiet but firm. I'm saying that somewhere between the contract signing and right now, this stopped being fake for me. And I don't know what to do with that. The admission hung in the air between them, vulnerable and terrifying. Evan crossed the room, stopping just close enough to see the fear in her eyes, the hope she was trying to hide. You think you're the only one? He asked quietly. You think I haven't noticed that when you smile at Mia, it's genuine? That when you defended me to Grant, you were angry for me? Not just for the strategy, that when you promised to protect my daughter, you meant it. That's different. It's not different. It's the same thing I've been feeling. Evan took her hand the same way he had in the boardroom, but this time it wasn't for cameras or witnesses. I came into this expecting ice. Instead, I found someone lonely and brilliant and brave enough to fight for what she deserves. Someone who learned how to fold napkins because it made my daughter smile. Someone who texts me at midnight to make sure I ate dinner. Sloane's eyes were bright, almost wet. This wasn't supposed to happen. I know. We had rules, boundaries. I know that too. So what do we do? Her voice broke slightly. How do we navigate this when the foundation was built on a lie? Evan thought about the question, about everything that had brought them to this moment: desperation and opportunity, fear and courage, performance and reality bleeding together until the lines disappeared. We stopped lying, he said simply. To the board, to the lawyers, to everyone else. Fine, we maintain the timeline. But between us, we're honest. We figure out what this is without the contract dictating it. And if it doesn't work, if we try this for real and it falls apart? Sloane's fear was evident now, raw and exposed. Mia gets hurt, you get hurt, and you have to feel something real instead of just calculating outcomes. Evan stepped closer, close enough to see the individual flecks of silver in her gray eyes. I know that terrifies you. It terrifies me too. But Sloane, I've been surviving for 3 years. Just surviving. And these past weeks with you, even with all the chaos and corporate warfare, I've been living again. Sloane looked at him like he was a puzzle she couldn't solve, a variable she hadn't planned for. Then she kissed him. It wasn't calculated or strategic. It was desperate and honest and full of everything they'd been holding back. Evan's hands found her face, her hair, pulling her closer. Sloane's fingers gripped his shirt like she was afraid he'd disappear. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sloane's careful control was completely shattered. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Real relationships. Feelings without strategy. Neither do I. My last relationship ended in a hospital room. Evan rested his forehead against hers. But maybe we figure it out together. No contract, no performance. Just us. Just us, Sloane repeated, like she was testing the words. Then she smiled, genuinely smiled, and Evan felt something in his chest unlock. They spent the night talking, really talking, sharing histories and fears and dreams that had nothing to do with corporate warfare or marriage clauses. Sloane told him about growing up in her father's shadow, always second best, always fighting for scraps of approval. Evan told her about Sarah, about grief that felt like drowning, about the terror of being solely responsible for another human life. Somewhere around 3 a.m., curled together on the couch with the city lights as their only witness, Sloane asked the question that had been hanging between them since that first night. So, are we actually sharing a bed now? Evan laughed, the sound soft and genuine. Maybe, but not tonight. Why not tonight? Because I want to do this right. I want to take you on an actual date. I want Mia to understand that this is real before we change the dynamics. He kissed her forehead gently. I want to earn this instead of just falling into it. Sloane looked at him with something close to wonder. You're really going to make me work for this, aren't you? Absolutely. Good. She settled against his chest. I've never had to work for someone before. I think I like it. They fell asleep there, tangled together, no cameras watching, no witnesses to perform for. Just two people who'd found each other in the worst possible way and somehow made it into something real. The next morning brought sunshine and Mia's delighted shriek when she found them on the couch. Does this mean you're really boyfriend and girlfriend now? She asked, bouncing with excitement. Sloane and Evan exchanged glances, and Evan saw the question in her eyes. How much truth do we tell? Yeah, sweetheart, Evan said. We're really together now. Finally, I've been waiting forever. Mia climbed onto the couch between them. Can we have pancakes? Families have pancakes on Saturdays. Families have pancakes, Sloane agreed, and the word families sounded different in her mouth now, softer, hopeful. They made pancakes together, the three of them crowded in a kitchen that had never been used for anything this chaotic or wonderful. Mia directed operations like a tiny general. Sloan followed instructions with endearing seriousness, and Evan watched them both and felt something he hadn't felt since Sarah died. Hope for a future that looked like joy instead of just survival. The following weeks brought their own challenges. The board's investigation into Grant revealed layers of corruption that shocked even Sloan. He'd been skimming company funds, taking bribes, using his position to enrich himself while running profitable divisions into the ground. The SEC investigation expanded to include fraud charges. Grant's lawyers negotiated a plea deal that would keep him out of prison, but permanently barred him from corporate leadership. Sloan watched her brother's empire crumble and felt nothing but relief. She'd expected guilt, sadness, some vestige of familial loyalty. Instead, she felt free. The will contest moved forward with the board unanimously supporting a challenge to the marriage clause. Sloan's lawyers were confident it would be overturned as discriminatory and outdated. But it would take time, months, possibly a year. "We could get divorced," Evan said one night, lying in bed together in Sloan's room that had become their room. They'd moved past Not Tonight 3 weeks ago, and Evan still marveled at how natural it felt, how right. "Speed up the timeline. You've already won control of the company." Sloan turned to face him, her hair loose around her shoulders, her expression soft in the darkness. "Why would we do that?" "Because the contract doesn't exist anymore. We burned it, remember?" She'd done it ceremonially 2 weeks ago, both of them watching the pages curl and blacken in the fireplace. "We're married because we choose to be. Or did you forget that part?" Evan pulled her closer, kissing her temple. "I didn't forget. I just want to make sure you're not staying because of obligation. I'm staying because I love you." The words came easier now, though they still made Sloan's voice shake slightly. "And I love Mia, and I love that she draws pictures of us as a family because that's what we actually are. Even though we started as a lie, maybe the beginning was a lie, but this..." Sloan gestured at the space between them, the intimacy and trust and genuine partnership they'd built. "This is the most honest thing I've ever done." Mia's surgery happened in April, 6 months after Evan had signed that first contract. They sat together in the waiting room, Evan, Sloan, and Mrs. Chen, who'd become almost like a grandmother to Mia. The surgery took 4 hours, and Evan spent every minute of it convinced something would go wrong, that happiness was too fragile to last. But it didn't go wrong. The surgeon emerged with good news. The repair was successful, Mia's heart was strong, and the prognosis was excellent. Evan broke down in Sloan's arms, 3 years of fear and grief and desperate hope finally releasing. She held him while he cried, whispering reassurances, being strong enough for both of them. When they finally saw Mia in recovery, groggy but smiling, she reached for both of them. "Did you tell the doctors you're married?" she asked sleepily. "So they'd let you both in?" Evan and Sloan exchanged glances, and Evan realized his daughter had known all along that something about their relationship was unconventional. 6-year-olds were more perceptive than adults gave them credit for. "We're married," Sloan confirmed. "For real." "I know, you look at each other different now, like Mom used to look at Dad." Mia's eyes drifted closed. "I like it." Later, standing in the hospital hallway while Mia slept peacefully, Sloan turned to Evan with tears in her eyes. "She compared us to you and Sarah," she whispered. I don't deserve..." "Yes, you do." Evan wiped away her tears gently. "Sarah would have liked you. She would have appreciated that you love Mia like she's yours. She is mine. Maybe not biologically, but..." Sloan stopped, overcome. "Yeah," Evan said softly. "She's ours." The will contest resolved 8 months after the board meeting that had destroyed Grant. The judge ruled the marriage clause unconstitutional and discriminatory, awarding Sloan full control of her father's shares without qualification. The victory made headlines, with legal experts praising it as a landmark case in corporate inheritance law. Sloan gave exactly one interview about it, to the same journalist who'd first broken the story of their marriage. "The irony," she told the reporter, "is that my father's sexist clause led me to the best decision I've ever made. I married for strategy, yes, but I stayed for love, and I'd make the same choice again tomorrow." The interview included a photo, Evan, Sloan, and Mia in Central Park, looking like any other family enjoying a Saturday afternoon. Mia was on Evan's shoulders, laughing. Sloane's hand was in Evan's free hand, her smile genuine and unguarded. The caption read, "Sometimes the best strategies are the ones that stop being strategic." On their first anniversary, the real one, not the contract signing, but the night they'd decided to make it real, Evan took Sloane to a tiny restaurant in Queens, the kind of place with plastic tablecloths and portions that could feed a family for a week. "This is where Sarah and I had our first date," he said as they settled into a booth. "I wanted to bring you here because—" He paused, gathering courage. "Because I wanted you to know that loving you doesn't diminish what I had with her. It's different, but it's just as real." Sloane reached across the table, taking his hand. "Thank you for trusting me with that." They ate cheap pasta and drank cheaper wine, and it was perfect. Afterward, walking through the neighborhood where Evan used to live, Sloane asked the question she'd been holding back. "Do you ever regret it? Saying yes that night?" Evan stopped walking, pulling her close under a streetlight that flickered like it was keeping time with his heartbeat. "I regret that it took desperation to bring us together. I regret that fear and debt had to be the catalyst." He kissed her softly. "But I don't regret you. I don't regret us. And I sure as hell don't regret that Mia has a mother who fights for her like you do." "I'm not her mother. You are. In every way that matters." Evan rested his forehead against hers. "You know what Mia asked me last week? She asked if you'd be at her parent-teacher conference. Not as my wife, but as her mom." Sloane's breath caught. "What did you tell her?" "I told her you wouldn't miss it for the world." The tears came then. The walls Sloane had spent a lifetime building finally completely demolished. "I love you," she said. "Both of you. So much it scares me." "Good, because we love you too, and you're stuck with us now." "Is that a threat or a promise?" "Both." Evan kissed her again, longer this time, not caring about the people walking past or the cars honking or the world moving around them. "Definitely both." They went home, to the penthouse that Mia had redecorated with art projects and family photos that had transformed from a sterile showpiece into an actual home. Mia was asleep, Mrs. Chen reading in the living room, the picture of domestic normalcy. Later, in their bedroom, Sloane asked the question one more time, but different now. "So, are we sharing a bed?" Evan pulled her close, both of them laughing at the callback to that first terrifying conversation. "Every night for the rest of our lives," he promised. "That's a long time." "Not long enough." They made love slowly, carefully, with the kind of intimacy that only came from genuine partnership and hard-won trust. Afterward, tangled together in sheets that cost more than Evan's old monthly rent, Sloane traced patterns on his chest. "I never believed in fairy tales," she said quietly. "I thought they were lies we told children to make them compliant. And now? Now I think maybe some of them are true, just not the way we expect." She looked up at him. "The prince didn't rescue me. I rescued myself, but having you beside me made the fight worth winning." "That's better than any fairy tale," Evan said. He was right, because fairy tales ended with happily ever after and assumed the story was over. But their story was just beginning, built on honesty instead of pretense, on choice instead of desperation, on love that had grown in the cracks of a contract designed to prevent exactly what they'd found. 6 months later, Sloane stood in front of the full board, not to defend herself this time, but to announce her succession plan. She'd restructured the company's leadership, promoted based on merit instead of politics, and established a foundation in her father's name that would fund medical research and help families drowning in healthcare debt. "My father believed marriage made people stable," she told the room. He was wrong. What makes people stable is purpose, partnership, and the courage to be vulnerable. I've learned that from my husband, who survived impossible circumstances with grace I'll never match. And I've learned it from my daughter, who teaches me every day that love doesn't require a contract, it just requires showing up. The board approved her proposals unanimously. Several members stopped to shake her hand, to tell her how proud her father would have been, to congratulate her on building something better than what she'd inherited. Evan was waiting in her office when she finished, Mia doing homework at the conference table that had once held only legal documents and corporate warfare. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Perfectly." Sloane kissed him, then ruffled Mia's hair. "How's the homework?" "Done. Can we get ice cream now? You promised." "I did promise." Sloane looked at Evan. "Family ice cream night?" "Absolutely." They left the office together. Not the CEO and her contractual husband and borrowed daughter, but a family built from broken pieces and second chances and the willingness to risk everything on something real. In the elevator, Mia held both their hands, swinging between them with pure joy. "I love us," she announced to the empty elevator. Sloane squeezed her hand. "Me too, sweetheart." "Me too." Evan looked at his wife, his real wife. Not the contract version, but the woman who'd fought beside him, who'd learned to be vulnerable, who'd chosen them every single day, and felt gratitude so profound it ached. "So," he said, echoing that first impossible conversation, "are we living happily ever after now?" Sloane smiled, the kind that reached her eyes and transformed her entire face. "Better than that, we're living honestly ever after, and that's more valuable than any fairy tale." She was right. Because fairy tales didn't include corporate warfare and medical debt and the messy reality of blending lives and learning to love again after loss. Fairy tales didn't include the hard work of actual partnership, the fights and compromises and choosing each other, even when it wasn't strategic. But their story did. And that made it better than any fairy tale could ever be. They got ice cream, Mia's choice, chocolate with rainbow sprinkles. They walked through Central Park as the sun set. Sticky fingers and easy laughter, and the kind of ordinary magic that came from being exactly where you belonged. And if anyone had asked Evan Cole whether he regretted bumping into Sloane Hart in that hallway, whether he regretted signing that contract, whether he regretted the chaos and fear and impossible choices, he would have laughed, because that collision, that contract, that desperate gamble had given him everything he'd lost and more than he dared to hope for. It had given him a partner who fought beside him instead of for him, a daughter who finally had the security and love she deserved, a future that looked like joy instead of just survival. And it had given Sloane Hart, ice-cold executive prodigy, corporate warrior, lonely fighter, a family that chose her not for strategy or benefit, but simply because she was worth choosing. They walked home together as the city lit up around them, three people who'd found each other in the worst possible way and made it into something beautiful. No contract, no performance, no pretending, just love, honest and hard-won and absolutely real. And that was the best ending of all.